the 6-0 year. But old widow was rejected for being too old, until a rancher made her feel the power.
Margaret had lived a quiet life for many years, a life that, in the eyes of many, seemed ordinary.
Breath. Yet for her, it was filled with memories that weighed heavily on her heart. She had been married to Henry for over 30 years, a kind and patient man who loved her deeply and shared every joy and sorrow. Together, they had built a small but comfortable home on the edge of town, filled with warm sunlight, the smell of fresh flowers, and the gentle sounds of birds that visited their garden. But when Henry passed away 5 years ago, a part of Margaret had gone with him. The house felt emptier, and the silence at night seemed louder than ever. Even the laughter of neighbors and the chatter at the market could not fill the hollow spaces that grief had created. 60 in age, when society often expected women to slow down, to settle into the background and fade quietly. She had never been one to chase excitement or seek attention, and perhaps that was why life had carried her into this stillness. But after Henry's death, friends and family gently suggested that she consider dating again, that perhaps life still had surprises waiting for her. The idea made Margaret uneasy. It felt almost disrespectful to Henry's memory to think about love in that way. Yet, deep inside, a small part of her longed for companionship, not to replace the love she had lost, but to remind herself that she was still alive, still capable of joy. Break. Margaret tried cautiously to step back into the world she had once known. She created a profile on a local dating website, hesitant and unsure. Every picture she uploaded seemed to reflect the life she had lived. Smiling softly, hair neatly pinned, clothes carefully chosen. She wrote honestly about herself, about her love for gardening, for quiet mornings with tea, for volunteering at the community center. She wanted someone to see her not just as a widow, but as a person with a life, with passions, and with stories to share. But the responses were discouraging. Some never replied at all, leaving her staring at her screen, wondering if she had made a mistake. Others replied politely, but quickly ended the conversation with excuses like, "I don't think we're compatible," or the crueler, "I'm sorry, but you're too old." Each rejection cut deeper than the last, a reminder of the world's narrow view of aging and beauty. Margaret tried not to take it personally, telling herself that she had lived a full life, that she had already experienced love in its deepest form, and that maybe she did not need another. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the garden outside swayed under the moonlight, she felt the sting of loneliness more sharply. Her friends noticed her quiet sadness. "You should get out more," said her neighbor Clara one morning, as they sipped tea on the porch. "There's a whole world out there, Margaret."
"You can't just hide in the house forever." Margaret smiled weakly, nodding, but inside, she felt a mix of fear and uncertainty.
The idea of stepping back into social spaces felt daunting.
Would people judge her for her age?
Would she embarrass herself? Would she find someone who could truly understand her, who could accept the years she carried and the experiences that shaped her? Determined to try, Margaret began attending small community events again. She went to book clubs, art fairs, and volunteer meetings. She greeted old friends with warmth, exchanged stories with neighbors, and tried to let herself enjoy the little moments of connection. Breaths. She found joy in small things, a child's laugh at the park, the way sunlight made the garden glow, the smell of bread baking at the local bakery. These moments reminded her that life still had beauty, that even in sorrow, happiness could be found in unexpected places. Yet there was always a shadow of doubt that followed her. At social gatherings, she often felt invisible, overlooked by those around her. Men seemed to talk past her or ignore her completely, as if she were already part of the furniture rather than a living, breathing person with thoughts and feelings. Desperate younger women at events seemed full of energy and opportunities, and Margaret could not help but compare herself to them, though she knew it was unfair. She carried herself with dignity, yet inside, a small voice whispered that perhaps she really was too old, that her chance for love had passed, and that she should accept a quiet life alone. One afternoon, Margaret decided to visit the town market, a place she had loved with Henry. The colors of fresh vegetables, the scents of spices, and the chatter of vendors brought back memories of the times they had shopped together. Breaking, she wandered slowly, greeting familiar faces, buying small treats for herself, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, a bouquet of wildflowers. As she walked, she felt a mixture of nostalgia and longing, a reminder that life could feel both comforting and painful at the same time. It was during these walks that Margaret began to notice a change within herself. She realized that the grief that had weighed her down for years was not the only part of her identity. She remembered how she had laughed at Henry's jokes, how she had danced with him in their living room, how she had cared for him when he was ill, and how she had celebrated every small victory together. These memories were bittersweet, but they were also evidence of her strength, of her capacity to love deeply, and of her resilience in the face of life's challenges. Slowly, Margaret began to understand that her worth was not measured by age or by the judgments of others, but by the life she had lived and the courage she still carried within her. One morning, Margaret stood in her garden, sunlight streaming over the roses and tulips she had tended for years. She realized that she wanted more from life, not the rush of youth, but the quiet joy of connection, of being seen, of feeling alive again. Rest. She did not know what the future held, nor did she know if love would ever return to her life. But she made a silent promise to herself. She would not allow the world's narrow ideas about age to define her happiness. By cautiously into the spaces where life still offered surprises. And so Margaret's journey began, not with grand gestures or sudden changes, but with small, deliberate steps. As she started to smile more freely at strangers, to speak her mind in community meetings, to enjoy the beauty of the world around her. She opened herself slowly to the possibility that life could hold joy again, and that perhaps, somewhere along the way, someone might see her not as too old, but as a woman who had lived, who had loved, and who was ready to embrace the power of her own life once more. Little did she know, life had a surprise waiting for her. An encounter that would challenge her fears, restore her confidence, and show her that age was never a limitation when it came to love, strength, and the courage to live fully. Margaret had been taking small steps to reconnect with life, but nothing had prepared her for what she encountered one sunny afternoon at the town fair. The fair was a lively place, full of laughter, music, and the smell of roasted corn and sweet pastries. Children ran between the stalls holding balloons that bobbed in the gentle breeze, while families gathered to enjoy the warm spring day.
Margaret wandered slowly among the tents, admiring the handmade crafts and colorful displays.
She loved seeing the creativity of others, the way people poured themselves into their work with pride and joy. It reminded her that life, despite its losses, could still be vibrant and full of wonder. As she walked, Margaret noticed a commotion near the far end of the fairgrounds. A group of men were gathered around a pen where a few horses were being shown, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. The sound of hooves clopping against the wooden boards and the occasional neigh caught her attention. Curiosity stirred in her, and she moved closer, weaving through the crowd to get a better view. She had always admired horses from a distance, remembering the few times she had ridden with Henry long ago. There was something majestic about them, the way they moved, with strength and grace, the intelligence in their eyes, and the quiet power in their presence. Among the group was a man who immediately stood out. He was older, perhaps in his mid-60s, with broad shoulders and a strong, confident posture. His hands, rough from years of work, guided a tall horse with care and precision. His face was weathered by sun and wind, yet his eyes held a calm kindness that seemed to draw people in. He noticed Margaret standing at the edge of the crowd and gave her a warm, polite smile. It was a simple gesture, but it made her heart skip a little. For a moment, she felt seen, not as an older woman who had been overlooked, but as a person capable of attention and interest. "Hello there," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Would you like to see the horses up close?" Margaret hesitated. She had not expected anyone to speak to her, let alone invite her into the pen with the horses' breaths. Her first instinct was to decline politely, worried she might embarrass herself or intrude. But something about the man's demeanor made her feel safe, and slowly she nodded. "Narration. I'd like that," she said softly. He extended his hand to guide her through the gate, and Margaret followed, pressed. As she stepped into the pen, she felt the soft earth beneath her feet and the warmth of the sun on her face. The horses turned their heads, their dark eyes studying her curiously. She took a deep breath and reached out to gently touch the closest horse, a chestnut mare with a flowing mane. The horse nuzzled her hand, and she laughed softly, surprised by the connection she felt. "This is Jake," the man said, as he adjusted the reins on another horse. "And this is Daisy." "She's friendly, but she knows who's boss." Margaret smiled. "She seems very kind." Jake chuckled. "She is, once she trusts you. Horses are like people in some ways. They can sense fear, hesitation, and honesty. Base turns. They respond to respect more than anything else."
Margaret listened, fascinated.
But she had never thought of animals in that way. But something in his words resonated with her. There was a gentle authority in his tone, a calm confidence that made her feel at ease. She realized she could talk to him without fear of judgment, without worrying about being dismissed because of her age. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of belonging, even in a place she had never been before. Jake began showing her the basics of horse care. He explained how to groom the animals, how to check their hooves, and even how to lead them safely. Margaret paid close attention, her hands trembling slightly as she brushed Daisy's coat. She was surprised by how much she enjoyed the process, how fulfilling it felt to work with such powerful, yet gentle creatures. Jake encouraged her with quiet words of praise. "You're a natural," he said. "You have the patience and the touch that horses respond to." Margaret felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Compliments like this were rare in her recent life. Most people had either ignored her or treated her politely but without warmth. Jake's words were different. They were sincere and kind, not pitying or condescending. Rest. She felt a small spark of confidence ignite inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. As the afternoon went on, Jake invited her to help him feed the animals. Margaret carried buckets of water and hay, moving carefully around the pens. She laughed when a goat nibbled at the edge of her sleeve and smiled when Daisy nudged her gently as if encouraging her. For the first time in a long while, she felt useful, capable, and alive. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed, buried under years of grief and self-doubt. They sat together for a break under the shade of a large oak tree. Jake offered her a bottle of water and some homemade cookies he had brought from the ranch. Margaret accepted, enjoying the simple gesture. They talked about small things at first, the fair, the weather, and the animals. But soon the conversation turned to more personal topics. Breaths Margaret found herself sharing stories about Henry, about her life, and even about her recent struggles with loneliness and rejection. Jake listened intently, never interrupting or judging. When she finished speaking, he nodded thoughtfully. "Margaret," he said gently, "life has a way of teaching us patience." Breaths. "Sometimes we have to wait a long time before something meaningful comes along, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. You're not too old for joy, or for love, or for new experiences. Don't let anyone make you believe that." Margaret felt a lump in her throat. She had heard similar words from friends and family, but somehow, coming from him, they felt different, They felt real, Bray. She realized that she had spent too long believing the world's cruel idea that her age made her less valuable, less desirable, less capable.
For the first time, she began to question that belief.
Jake invited her to visit his ranch the next weekend, suggesting she could see more of the animals and perhaps try riding a horse if she wanted.
Margaret hesitated.
She had never ridden in decades, and she worried about being clumsy or awkward. But the invitation sparked a tiny thrill of anticipation in her chest. It was a chance to step further into a world that seemed alive, exciting, and open to her. A world that she had thought belonged only to younger people. "Yes," she said finally, a small smile breaking across her face. "I'd like that." Jake's eyes twinkled. "Good." Breaths. "I'll show you everything. You might surprise yourself." Over the next few days, Margaret thought often about the upcoming visit. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She prepared herself carefully, choosing clothes that would be practical for the ranch yet comfortable, making sure she had shoes she could walk in safely.
But more than anything, she prepared her mind.
Brace. She resolved to face her fears, to try something new, and to embrace the possibility that life could still offer adventure and connection. When the day finally arrived, Margaret took a deep breath as she approached Jake's ranch. The gates opened to reveal wide fields, grazing horses, and a rustic but welcoming house. The air smelled of hay, earth, and something uniquely alive. Freedom, hard work, and life itself. Margaret felt her heart swell. She was no longer a visitor in the world. She was stepping into a place where she could belong, even if only for a day. Jake greeted her warmly, and they spent hours together, caring for animals, learning the routines of ranch life, and sharing stories. But Margaret discovered muscles she hadn't used in years, felt the wind on her face as she walked through open fields, and laughed freely in a way she had almost forgotten. Jake's presence was steady and encouraging, never rushing her, never judging. With him, she felt seen, respected, and valued, not for her youth or appearance, but for her courage, her kindness, and her willingness to embrace life again. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Margaret realized something profound. She was no longer the lonely widow who had feared she was too old to matter. She was a woman rediscovering her strength, her confidence, and her joy. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. Margaret returned home from the ranch that day with a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. The memories of walking among the fields, brushing the horses, and feeling the wind against her face filled her mind over and over. She thought about Jake, his calm voice, the way he had guided her gently without rushing or judging her. It had been a small world, the ranch, but for Margaret it felt vast and alive, filled with possibilities she had never imagined at her age. The next morning she woke early, as she often did, but something had shifted inside her. The quiet of her house, which once felt heavy and oppressive, now felt peaceful and full of potential. She tended to her garden with renewed care, noticing the colors of her flowers, the scent of the soil, and the gentle buzzing of bees. Life seemed richer somehow, more vivid. She realized that in allowing herself to try something new, she had discovered a strength she had long forgotten. By midweek, Margaret's excitement grew as the day of her return visit to the ranch approached. She spent the days preparing herself, not only with practical things like clothes and shoes suitable for ranch work, but also with a mindset she had not practiced in years: anticipation without fear. She reminded herself that it was not about impressing anyone or proving her worth, but about embracing a chance to learn, explore, and feel alive.
Every small decision, from packing her bag to choosing a sturdy jacket, became part of her ritual of self-respect and courage.
When she arrived at the ranch again, Jake greeted her with a smile that felt familiar and comforting, as if no time had passed since their first meeting.
"Good morning, Margaret," he said warmly.
"Ready for another day?" Yes, she said, a smile spreading across her face. I can't wait. They began with the basics once more, feeding the animals, cleaning stalls, and checking on the horses. Margaret moved with more confidence this time. Her hands were steadier, her steps surer, and the animals seemed to respond to her with trust and calm. She felt a sense of accomplishment with every task completed, a feeling she had not experienced in years. Each small success built her confidence, teaching her that she was capable of learning new skills, no matter her age. After a morning of work, Jake suggested they try something a little more challenging. Would you like to try riding Daisy today? He asked. Margaret hesitated for a moment. Memories of falling or being clumsy as a younger rider flashed in her mind. First, she could feel the familiar anxiety creeping in, the self-doubt she had carried for so long. But then she looked at Jake's calm expression, the patient encouragement in his eyes, and she remembered the strength she had felt the last time she was here. Narration. She took a deep breath and nodded.
I'd like to try, she said, her voice steady.
Jake guided her as she climbed onto Daisy's back, steadying the horse and giving her clear instructions. Margaret felt a thrill of nervous excitement as she settled into the saddle, her hands gripping the reins with care. At first, Daisy moved slowly, almost cautiously, but as Margaret relaxed and found her balance, the horse responded with smooth, confident steps. Margaret laughed softly at the sensation of moving through the open fields, the wind brushing against her face, and the power beneath her. You're doing wonderfully, Jake said from beside her. Just remember to trust yourself and Daisy. She'll follow your lead. With each stride, Margaret felt a rush of empowerment. She was no longer the woman defined by loss or fear, but a person rediscovering her abilities and her joy. The feeling of balance, control, and connection with the horse awakened something deep inside her, a reminder that she was capable of so much more than she had allowed herself to believe.
After the ride, they returned to the barn to care for the animals.
Margaret's muscles ached pleasantly, a sign of effort and accomplishment. She found herself smiling more freely, laughing at small mishaps and feeling a warmth in her chest that she had thought was lost forever. Jake noticed the change in her demeanor and encouraged it gently. You've got a natural rhythm with them, he said, nodding toward Daisy and the other horses. It's not just about skill. It's about connection, patience, and respect. You have all of those. Margaret felt a sense of pride that was new and exhilarating. Praise like this was rare in her life lately, not because she lacked value, but because few had taken the time to truly see her. Jake's words were sincere, and they reinforced the growing realization that she was capable, strong, and worthy of attention. Not for her youth, but for her character, courage, and the life she had lived. Over the next few hours, they moved on to other tasks around the ranch. Margaret learned to mend fences, carry water for the animals, and even help with small repairs around the barn. Each task seemed to open a new part of herself, her determination, her patience, her ability to embrace challenges. But it was hard, but it was fulfilling in a way she had rarely experienced in the quiet, controlled life she had led since Henry's passing. At one point, Margaret noticed how beautiful the ranch was in the late afternoon sunlight. The fields stretched wide and open, golden and green in alternating patches, while the horses grazed peacefully. Birds sang from the trees, and the air smelled fresh and earthy. She felt a deep sense of connection with the world around her, a feeling that had been missing for years. It was not only the physical work or the animals that excited her. It was the sense of purpose, of being alive, and of being part of something bigger than herself. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Jake suggested they take a break under the shade of a large oak tree. Margaret settled down on the soft grass, feeling tired but invigorated. They shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit that Jake had brought from the ranch kitchen. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from small talk to personal stories. Margaret found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never voiced to anyone outside her close family. She spoke of her grief, her fears, and the loneliness she had carried since Henry's passing. Jake listened attentively, his expression calm and supportive. He did not interrupt, nor did he offer empty words of comfort. Instead, he acknowledged her experiences, validating her feelings while gently encouraging her to see her own strength.
You've been through so much, he said quietly.
And yet, here you are, willing to try something new, to step outside your comfort zone.
That's more courage than most people ever show in their lives. You should be proud of yourself.
Margaret felt a warmth rise in her chest. No one had ever said words like that to her in recent years. It was as though someone had seen through the layers of doubt and grief to the heart of who she truly was. The feeling was powerful, awakening confidence and hope that she had long buried. As the evening approached, Margaret reluctantly prepared to leave the ranch. She felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing she had experienced something transformative. Jake walked with her to the gate, offering a reassuring smile.
You did wonderfully today, he said.
Inspiration. I hope you'll come back soon. There's still so much I'd like to show you. Margaret smiled, feeling gratitude and anticipation.
I will.
Brash, I feel different, stronger somehow. Jake nodded. Good. That's exactly how it should feel. And remember, this is just the beginning.
You have so much strength inside you, Margaret. You just needed a chance to see it for yourself.
On the drive home, Margaret reflected on the day's experiences. She thought about how much joy she had felt, how capable she had been, and how much the animals had responded to her care and attention. More importantly, she realized that her self-perception had begun to shift. She no longer felt fragile or invisible. She was discovering a confidence and power she had forgotten existed. That night, Margaret lay in bed, thinking about the ranch, the animals, and Jake. She realized that life could hold excitement, learning, and fulfillment at any age. Her heart felt lighter, her mind clearer, and her spirit more alive. But she was not defined by the years she had lived, nor by society's idea of what someone her age should be. She was defined by her courage, her willingness to grow, and her openness to life's possibilities. In the weeks that followed, Margaret visited the ranch frequently. Each visit built on the last, reinforcing her confidence and her sense of purpose. But she continued to learn new skills, develop stronger bonds with the animals, and grow closer to Jake. Not in a rushed or forced way, but naturally, as two people sharing mutual respect, trust, and genuine care. Margaret had entered the ranch unsure of herself and hesitant about her abilities. Now, she left each visit feeling empowered, capable, and alive. She had rediscovered a part of herself that had been buried under grief and doubt, and she realized that life still held adventure, connection, and joy, even at 60. The ranch, the animals, and Jake had given her more than a chance to try something new. They had given her a chance to reclaim her confidence, to see her own worth, and to embrace life with courage and determination. For the first time in many years, Margaret felt truly excited about the future. She no longer saw herself as too old, too fragile, or too limited. She had discovered the strength, joy, and power that had been inside her all along, waiting for the right moment and the right place to emerge. Margaret's visits to the ranch had become the highlight of her weeks. Each time she arrived, she felt more confident, more alive, and more in tune with herself than she had in years. The horses had grown familiar with her touch. The goats followed her as she walked through the pens. And even the smaller tasks around the ranch, mending fences, filling water troughs, stacking hay, brought her a quiet sense of pride. But despite all of this, Margaret was not immune to doubt. Deep down, she carried fears she had never fully faced, fears that whispered during quiet moments and tried to pull her back into the shadows of insecurity and loneliness. One evening after a long day at the ranch, Margaret sat on the porch of the small farmhouse, sipping tea and watching the sun sink behind the rolling hills. The sky was painted in gold, pink, and purple, a breathtaking display that always left her in awe. But yet, as she watched the colors fade, a familiar unease crept into her mind. She thought of the world outside the ranch, of people who might never understand her or accept her for who she was. She worried about being judged, about being dismissed because of her age. Breath. She remembered the sting of previous rejections and wondered if, no matter how much she had changed inside, the world might still see her as too old. These thoughts lingered even as Jake approached with a friendly smile. "Braid, you look deep in thought," he said, taking a seat beside her. "Everything okay?" Margaret hesitated, unsure how much to share, but something in Jake's calm presence made it easier. Sometimes I wonder if all this, everything I've been feeling, learning, and trying, is enough," she admitted softly. "I've been rejected so many times, and part of me worries it will always be this way, that I'll never be seen the way I want to be." Jake nodded slowly, listening carefully. "It's natural to feel that way," he said. "Life doesn't erase the experiences we've had, the hurt or disappointment. But you have to remember something very important. Your worth is not defined by how the world sees you. It's defined by who you are, what you do, and the courage you've shown every day, Brabe." Margaret felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet comfort in his words, but the doubt still lingered.
I know, she said, but what if I'm wrong?
What if I'm imagining this confidence and it doesn't really exist? What if, when the world sees me, it's back to the same rejection and loneliness? Jake reached over, placing a steady hand on hers.
Then we keep going. Confidence isn't about never feeling fear or doubt.
It's about facing them anyway. You're stronger than you realize. Margaret. You've already proven that by stepping onto this ranch, learning new skills, and embracing life again. The rest is just the world catching up to the person you've become. Margaret looked at him, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe it. She realized that her fears, while natural, did not have to control her. She had taken steps that required courage, had faced challenges that scared her, and had come out stronger each time. If she could do that, perhaps she could face the world outside the ranch too, without shrinking back into doubt or fear. The next few weeks brought more opportunities to test herself. Jake began to teach Margaret more advanced skills around the ranch, things she had never imagined trying at her age. She learned to ride the horses through uneven terrain, to lead the herd across the pastures, and even to help guide a small group of calves back to their pen. Each task was a challenge, sometimes exhausting, but always rewarding. Margaret discovered muscles she hadn't used in years, developed sharper focus, and felt a sense of accomplishment that radiated from her very core. Yet with each success came moments of vulnerability. During one particularly challenging ride, Daisy spooked at a sudden movement in the field, throwing Margaret off balance. She fell to the ground with a thud, her pride more bruised than her body. She sat there for a moment, feeling the sting of embarrassment and fear. Would Jake think she wasn't capable? Would this confirm all her doubts? Jake approached quickly, helping her to her feet with a steady hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. Margaret nodded, brushing dirt from her clothes. But the worry lingered.
"I'm fine," she said, though her voice was tinged with uncertainty. Jake smiled gently.
"See? That's the thing about fear and mistakes. They're temporary."
You fell, yes, but you got back up. That matters more than staying perfect.
Breath. Every step, every effort is proof.
of your strength.
Margaret thought about his words as she looked at the horse, who had calmed and now nuzzled her gently.
She realized he was right. The fall did not define her. What defined her was her courage to try again, to keep learning, and to keep believing in herself despite the setbacks. That evening she went to bed feeling proud, not just of her skills, but of the woman she was becoming. As Margaret's confidence grew at the ranch, she began to face her fears outside of it too. She returned to community events, book clubs, and social gatherings with a renewed sense of self-assurance. She smiled more freely, spoke her mind with clarity, and noticed people responding to her differently. Friends and neighbors commented on her glow, her vitality, and her joy. Some men began to take notice, and for the first time in years, she felt the spark of possibility, not because of superficial attraction, but because of the way she carried herself, the confidence and warmth she now exuded. Despite the progress, Margaret still had moments of self-doubt. At times, the world's whispers seemed louder than her inner voice. Breaths. She feared that society's expectations, the judgments of others, and her own insecurities might pull her back into the shadows of loneliness. But each time she reminded herself of the lessons she had learned at the ranch. That strength comes from effort, that courage is not the absence of fear, and that her worth was never defined by age, appearances, or the opinions of others. A turning point came during a community rodeo, an event Jake encouraged her to attend. He suggested she participate in a small demonstration, riding Daisy through a simple course to show her skills. Margaret hesitated at first, remembering the fall from weeks before. But she also remembered the confidence and pride she had cultivated. She agreed not to impress anyone, but to prove to herself that she could. The day of the rodeo, Margaret felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The crowd gathered, cheering and laughing, and she could feel the energy of anticipation in the air. As she mounted Daisy, she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the lessons she had learned. Trust in her abilities, stay calm, and embrace the moment. When the course began, Margaret guided Daisy with steady hands, moving through the obstacles with precision and grace. The crowd cheered, but Margaret barely noticed them. She was focused on the horse, the path, and the strength she felt coursing through her body. Every stride reminded her of the journey she had taken, from doubt and grief to confidence and empowerment. When she completed the course, she felt a rush of triumph that went beyond applause or recognition. She had proven to herself that she was capable, strong, and fearless in the face of challenge. Jake met her at the end of the course, his smile wide and approving. "You did it," he said. "Not just because of the ride, but because of everything it represents. You faced your fears, embraced your strengths, and shown the world and yourself what you're capable of." Margaret laughed, a sound full of relief and joy. She realized that the validation she sought from others was no longer necessary. She had found it within herself. The journey at the ranch had transformed her, giving her the courage to face challenges, the wisdom to trust in her own abilities, and the joy of rediscovering her strength and power. By the end of that season, Margaret had grown into a woman who no longer feared rejection or doubt, but despised past her physically, emotionally, and mentally, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and fully alive. The ranch, the animals, and Jake had not just taught her new skills. They had helped her reclaim her life, her self-esteem, and her belief in her own worth. Margaret now walked with a quiet confidence, her head held high, her heart open to possibility, but she also knew that she had the inner strength to overcome them. She had learned that life's challenges were not meant to hold her back, but to show her what she was capable of. And with that knowledge, she embraced each day with courage, joy, and the unwavering belief that she could face anything the world placed before her. Margaret had come a long way since the first day she had wandered into the ranch, hesitant and unsure of herself. Over the weeks, she had discovered a strength she did not know she possessed, learned skills she had never imagined mastering, and built a confidence that radiated from within. Each visit to the ranch had brought her closer to a sense of purpose, a feeling of vitality, and a renewed joy in living. But even more than that, she had discovered that life could offer her connection and love once again if she allowed herself to embrace it. The transformation did not happen overnight. Margaret had faced doubts, insecurities, and moments of fear. But with each challenge, she proved to herself that she was capable of more than she had believed. Riding horses, caring for the animals, and navigating the open fields had taught her patience, balance, and resilience. Jake had been there at every step, not as a teacher imposing lessons, but as a patient guide, encouraging her to trust herself, to believe in her own abilities, and to embrace life fully. His kindness, respect, and gentle humor had quietly shown her that age was not a limitation, and that a heart willing to grow and connect could find joy and companionship at any stage of life. One morning, Margaret arrived at the ranch feeling a mix of anticipation and nervous excitement. She had decided to try something new that day, riding Daisy across the hills to a part of the ranch she had never explored. It was a challenge she had hesitated to take on before, worried about her balance and her skills. But now, with the confidence she had gained, she felt ready. She knew that the journey was about more than the ride. It was about trusting herself, testing her abilities, and embracing the sense of freedom that came with living fully. As she guided Daisy through the open fields, the wind in her hair, the sun warm on her face, Margaret felt a powerful sense of liberation. Every step she took was a reminder that she was no longer bound by doubt, grief, or fear. The hills stretched wide before her, endless and inviting. And for the first time in years, she felt completely in control of her life. The animals followed their routines calmly, as if recognizing the quiet authority she now carried. Every hoofbeat, every rustle of grass beneath Daisy's feet seemed to echo her own heartbeat, strong and steady, full of life. Jake rode alongside her, offering guidance and encouragement. "You're doing wonderfully," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Not because of the ride, but because of everything you've accomplished to get here."
Look at how far you've come, Margaret smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest.
She remembered the hesitant woman who had first stepped onto the ranch unsure of herself and afraid to try. Now she felt vibrant, capable, and alive. She realized that the journey she had taken was not just about learning new skills or caring for animals. It was about reclaiming herself, her confidence, and her joy. After the ride, they returned to the barn to care for the animals, and Margaret noticed how much she had changed. Tasks that had once seemed daunting now felt natural and manageable. She handled the horses with ease, guided the younger animals confidently, and even took initiative with chores that had once made her anxious. The transformation was not only physical but emotional and mental. She felt more resilient, self-assured, and connected to the world around her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the fields, Jake and Margaret sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the horses graze peacefully. There was a comfortable silence between them, one that did not need words to convey the connection they shared. Margaret realized that she had found more than skills or confidence at the ranch. She had found companionship, respect, and a sense of belonging. "Margaret," Jake said quietly, breaking the silence, "I've watched you grow over these weeks, and I want you to know how much I admire you. Not just for what you can do, but for who you are. You've faced fear, doubt, and loss, and you've come out stronger and more vibrant than ever. You deserve happiness, joy, and love, no matter your age." Disgusting. Margaret felt a lump in her throat. For years, she had feared that her age made her invisible, that the world no longer had space for her dreams or her heart. But hearing Jake's words, seeing the genuine respect and care in his eyes, she realized that life had not left her behind. She was still capable of love, adventure, and connection. She was not too old to be seen, appreciated, or valued. The following weeks brought a deepening of their relationship. Jake continued to teach Margaret about ranch life, but their connection grew beyond lessons and tasks.
They shared meals, talked about their pasts, and laughed at small everyday moments.
Margaret found herself opening her heart in ways she had not thought possible, letting go of the fears that had held her back for so long. Jake treated her as an equal, respecting her experiences, honoring her independence, and encouraging her to embrace her strengths. One afternoon, while they were walking through the fields together, Jake paused and looked at her thoughtfully. "You've changed so much," he said. "Great. It's inspiring to see you embrace life this way. I hope you see yourself the way I see you, a strong, capable, and amazing woman."
Margaret's heart swelled with gratitude and emotion.
She realized that she had not only rediscovered herself, but had also found a partner who valued her for who she truly was. The love she had feared might be impossible at her age was not only possible, it was real, built on respect, admiration, and genuine connection.
With this newfound sense of empowerment, Margaret began to take even bolder steps in her life. She returned to community events with confidence, volunteering, speaking, and engaging with people in ways she had not before.
She discovered that others noticed her energy, her presence, and her vitality. She was no longer invisible. She was radiant, alive, and inspiring. Every small interaction, every conversation reinforced her sense of worth and belonging.
Margaret also began to embrace new challenges beyond the ranch.
She took short trips to nearby towns, explored hiking trails she had never visited, and even joined a local gardening club where she shared her knowledge and experience. Each new activity was a testament to her courage and determination, proving that life did not have to slow down with age. It could flourish with purpose and intention. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Margaret reflected on her journey. She thought about the years of grief after Henry's passing, the loneliness, the rejections, and the quiet self-doubt. She realized that every step she had taken, from the hesitant first visit to the ranch to the confident rides across the fields, had led her to a place of empowerment and joy. She had reclaimed her sense of self, her strength, and her heart. Jake joined her on the porch, handing her a warm cup of tea. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the world glow in the soft light of evening. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace. She had discovered that life's power did not come from youth, beauty, or societal approval. It came from believing in oneself, embracing challenges, and remaining open to love and connection at any age. As they watched the last rays of the sun fade, Margaret realized that she was ready for whatever came next. She had found strength, confidence, and love. Not because the world had given it to her, but because she had reclaimed it for herself. Life was not over at 60. It was just beginning in a way she had never imagined, full of possibilities, adventure, and joy. The ranch had taught her many lessons: the importance of patience, the value of courage, the joy of learning, and the power of connection. But the greatest lesson of all was the one she had discovered within herself. That age was never a barrier to living fully, to loving deeply, or to embracing the power that comes from believing in one's own worth. Margaret's laughter once again echoed across the fields, her steps light and purposeful, her heart open to life's possibilities. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and obstacles to overcome, but she also knew that she was strong enough to face them all. With Jake by her side, the love she had found, and the confidence she had reclaimed, Margaret walked into her future with courage, joy, and the unwavering belief that life could bloom at any age. Her story became more than a personal journey. It became a testament to anyone who had ever felt invisible, rejected, or too old to matter. Margaret had discovered that life's power comes not from external validation but from the courage to embrace oneself fully, to pursue joy relentlessly, and to welcome love with an open heart. And in that realization, she found a happiness that was deep, lasting, and entirely her own.